God, you are back with comedian David Boyle, and I'm quitting alcohol. So Melbourne is just going to be in lockdown forever now. This is their fucking plan. This is the roadmap to heaven for these cunts in charge of Melbourne. So this is what they want here, to ease the stage 4 restrictions, or 5, whatever we're in. We're in the hardest restrictions. So for us to go down to the second hardest restrictions, they want an average of 5 new cases a day for 2 fucking weeks. It's been hovering around like just below 10, 20 for like a month now. What the fuck else are you going to do to get it lower? Explain that to me. Just wait it out for another fucking month. Fucking crazy. So they want a target of 5 new cases per day. That's not deaths per day. We're not trying to get it down to 5 deaths per day. That's new cases. That's one house. That's one household all getting it per day. No one's leaving their house either. So that's just to take it down to stage 4 restrictions, where you can leave your house, you can go see people, nothing's open yet, you can't do anything outside, you can just move around a little bit. And then what they want, to ease restrictions further, to start opening shit up, they want 0 new cases a day for like a month, I think it was, or 2 weeks or a month. I think it was a month. They want a month of 0 cases to start opening shit up. Who knows when that is? That could be fucking December next year. What's the fucking game plan there? It's fucking out of control now. I watched this cunt, the Premier of Victoria, Daniel Andrews, and I fucking wasn't even listening to a word he was saying. I was just staring at his face, and I was trying to see what his character was like. I was trying to see what this fuckover is all about. I already know he's a lying scumbag piece of shit. Everyone knows that. Him and his government went to the Royal Commission just the other day and were asked questions about whose decision was it to hire private security to guard the COVID isolation hotels. And every single one who got interviewed said, I don't know. It wasn't my decision. I don't know. Every single one of them. So it was no one's decision. It wasn't his decision. He's the leader. You're the leader. You take responsibility. If everyone else says no, just go, well, it's my fucking government. If I'm the leader, I take responsibility. The final decision comes down to me, doesn't it? Doesn't it? Isn't that how leadership works? No, he said, I don't know. I don't know. No one knew. So no one made that decision. And then some cunt yesterday had to resign because they found phone calls between him and the police talking about private security or something like that. So he had to resign. Daniel Andrews, the Premier of Victoria, is like, I had no idea. This fucking slimy scumbag cunt. So I was watching him today and I was just trying to get an idea of his character. And he is less actually malicious than I thought. He's just a spineless, spindly, little fucking weak cunt. That's all he is. He initially fucked up monumentally because he's a spineless cunt. And he's also corrupt as well. All that shit, of course, but I'm talking about the character of him. And now what he's done is a complete hardcore overcorrection because he doesn't want to fucking get in more trouble because he's a spineless cunt. He wants to somehow come out of this clean. He doesn't actually know what he's doing. He just knows if he can get it to 0, no matter what damage is done, he can at least point to the number 0. Look, I got it down to 0. It doesn't matter what happened before. It doesn't matter that people are fucking jumping out of buildings, committing suicide, beating their kids, going insane. Look at the 0. Anyway, I've had enough of that cunt. He is legitimately a spineless fucking cunt. And if you're overseas and you're like, I wish our government looked after us as much as the Victorian government looked after them. This isn't looking after anything. This is insanity. This is pure fucking insanity. If you want to go into lockdowns, you're just fucking crazy. Take it from someone who's been in lockdown since March, except not me in particular, because I've been doing virtually whatever I want. But other people, like my friend, he hasn't left 5 kilometers from his house the whole time and he's gone fucking insane. Look at Bangalore in India. They're completely open and their fucking cases are going through the fucking roof. And no one cares. Yeah, there's some people dying here and there. There's actually people who have died from COVID-19 who are friends of my wife's family. But people die all the time. This is just another thing you could die from now. Add it to the fucking list. I want to know what the fuck is going to happen when there's a real fucking pandemic. That ain't going to look fucking pretty. Anyway, that's enough of fucking lockdown news. I'm fucking so over it now. So it's Wednesday again, and Wednesdays is now Boyle Breaks History. I choose something historical I know very little about, and I do like 30 to 35 minutes of research just before I start the podcast and lecture you on how history really played out. It's called Boyle Breaks History, and this week I've chosen a historical event that's very close to the fucking Boyle hearts. This week I'm going to talk about the Irish potato famine. Now, when I chose this, I knew nothing about the Irish potato famine. I could not have even told you what fucking century it was in. I had no idea. Occasionally at pubs back in the day, I used to get drunk with Irish, and maybe I'd throw out the potato famine in conversation like I knew something about it, but I absolutely knew nothing about it. And I'll tell you this right now, after a little bit of research into the potato famine in Ireland, what a fucking snoozer. Jesus Christ. I thought it was going to be exciting. I thought there was going to be some fucking entertainment in the potato famine. But fuck me, famines are boring. So maybe I'm just going to have to throw in some fucking lies in there for entertainment. You're going to have to sift through the lies. I might just make some shit up to keep you and myself interested in this one. But in my knowledge of famines, they generally all seem to go down the same way. Something happens to the crops, then the people who own the land start selling all the remaining food overseas, and then all the poor die. That's how it seems to go down every single fucking famine. And the Irish famine isn't much fucking different. Okay, let's get started on the Irish potato famine. Okay, the Irish potato famine, I think it kicked off officially in 1845, and I think it lasted for 5 years or something. So back in those days, the fucking Irish were ruled by the fucking Poms. The fucking Poms. And so basically the Irish were the poor cunts in Ireland. And the Irish became super dependent on potatoes because they only had small plots of farmland where they couldn't grow anything else, and potatoes were like high yield, you could feed your family on it, and all the big landowners lived in England. And they were more or less subsistent fucking potato farmers. So they were dependent on the potato, and they really only grew one type of potato. It was called the lumpar potato, I think. Lumpar, something like that. So there wasn't a big diverse range of fucking potatoes. The Irish were fucking cropping out there. And here's something I didn't know. The fucking potato isn't even Irish. It's not even from Ireland. It's from fucking Peru. What were the Irish doing before the fucking potato? I suppose they were eating healthily because the fucking English weren't there. So what happened was, in Ireland at the time, there wasn't a big range of restaurants. So everyone was eating at home and the cooking was shit. It was just potatoes. Mashed potatoes, boiled potatoes, roast potatoes. It was just fucking potatoes. So the whole of Ireland went on a fucking hunger strike and demanded some better fucking cooking. And that's how the potato chip was invented. And so you can thank the brave Irish people from the 1800s for our present day salt and vinegar chips. Thank you, Irish. So what fucking happened was, there was some sort of potato infection. The potato blight. It started off in the US, they think. They think it actually started in Mexico, then went to the US, and then it made its way to Europe. But when this potato blight hit the US, it didn't hit as hard because the US planted different types of potato. There was like 50 different types of potato or some shit. And then it made its way through Europe, and crops were failing across Europe. And then it hit Ireland, and Ireland only had one type of potato, and it fucking smashed this potato. So 1945, it fucking hits. They lose like 80% of their fucking potato crop, so a lot of poor are fucking starving already. I think it was pretty bad that first year, but it wasn't as bad as it was about to get. So when I was researching this, YouTubing, I was listening to a few different things, and I was hearing a lot of shit about the infection, how that was the main problem, and at the end of talking about the infection, they would start trailing off and say, and the English government didn't help that much either. And I was like, what did the English government do? And then I started listening, and everyone I was listening to was fucking English. And I'm like, what the fuck did the English government do? So I'm like, I need to find a fucking Irish cunt to tell me about this Irish famine. And so I found an Irish cunt on YouTube who was willing to tell me the truth. The famine was bad, but if it wasn't for the fucking English, it pretty much could have been avoided. But the English fucking hated the Irish. The English had a stereotype of the Irish that they were violent, lazy drunks. I have no idea where the fuck they would have got that from. That's just pure racism. I'm glad the Irish aren't viewed that way anymore. So the English Prime Minister at the start of the famine was Sir Robert Peel. Fucking Sir Robert Potato Peel. The Irish, with their sense of humour, must have been thinking God was playing a fucking cruel joke on them again. So fucking Prime Minister Potato Peel, I think he was an alright guy. A kind of alright guy. He sort of wanted to help the Irish. He wanted to redact these things called the Corn Laws, which were the laws where they couldn't import cheap grain from the US, so whoever was running the grain in the UK could keep their prices higher. So he wanted to redact that. I think he opened up some soup kitchens, brought some grain over from the US to feed people, started some public works, but it was completely fucked anyway. The crops weren't growing. The landlords who were living in England were kicking people off their land because they couldn't pay the rent. They were replacing the old potato farms with like fucking cows and shit. Things were still fucked, but they were going to get more fucked because the Peel government got kicked out and then some other cunt came in and he stopped all the food relief. I forget his name. What's his name? Charles Trevelyan. I think he's one of the most hated guys in Irish history. So, fuck Trevelyan. So Trevelyan, who was Prime Minister Lord John Russell's guy, fucking stopped everything. Well, he stopped all the food coming into Ireland and didn't stop any of the food going out because Ireland, through the whole fucking famine, was a net exporter of food to England. Can you imagine that? Just starving to death. And just watching your food just getting driven out of town to some other fucking pasty fat cunts. So that Trevelyan government just fucked everything up. So the worst year of the famine was 47, Black 47. Fucking people were dying, everyone was starving. Like, I'm telling you, they were fucking hungry there. Cunts were hungry as fucking 47. I don't know how the Boyles got out of there. The Boyles didn't leave fucking Ireland till the 1900s. I don't know how the Boyles survived that because the Boyles don't go fucking hungry well. Unlike me, but I'm the new generation. I know how to intermittent fast. So about 1 million Irish died during this famine and about 1 million more began immigrating overseas, mainly to like Canada, the US, shit like that. People were committing crimes, so they would be arrested and sent to the penal colony of Australia. That's how desperate things were getting. So before the famine, Ireland had about 8 million people. After the famine, it was like around 6 million people or something like that. It was fucking hectic. And I'm not too sure what happened in the end. I think Conor McGregor came in, started swinging, and he ended up smashing heaps of cunts, so the fucking famine finished. I'm pretty sure that's how it happened. But it wasn't just the famine that killed people. There was a lot of disease and shit. As a result of the famine, that also killed a lot of people. So that's it. Conor McGregor came and saved the day. I have no idea how it ended. I suppose potatoes just started growing again, and the Irish and the English lived happily ever after, hand in hand, side by side. Alright, that is it for tonight. If you're enjoying the podcast, subscribe, but share it with your friends who you think might enjoy it, and I'll see you the fuck later.